Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I will be showing you how I make these wonderful loaves of bread every week. You only need a handful of ingredients and I bet you in no time you will start to make your own fluffy bread like this. To get started, first I'm going to show you how to measure your ingredients. First I'm starting with the flour. This is the exact brand that I use. This flour has a higher protein content, that's why I like it. But you can use any brand of bread flour you like. If you want to get the most accurate measurements, especially for this recipe, then I recommend you using a kitchen scale. This is what I use for most of my baking recipes as I get the most accurate measurements every time. After measuring the flour, I go ahead and measure all the other ingredients. Next, I measure the salt. You can use a teaspoon for this method, but like I said, I like using the kitchen scale because I get the most accurate measurements. I go ahead and measure the water. Then I measure the sugar. Following that, I measure the margarine. You can also use butter if you like. After measuring the butter, I go ahead and measure the yeast. For this recipe, I'm using wet yeast, but you can use instant yeast. The only difference is the moisture content. Instant yeast can be added directly to the dough, while active dry yeast needs lukewarm water for activation. I like using wet yeast because it can impart a more complex and nuanced flavor to baked goods. You also need two standard baking pans. If you don't have these standard baking pans, you can purchase these pans at your local Chinese shop. I start by adding my flour to a mixing bowl. Next, I add the salt, sugar, and margarine. Followed by my wet yeast. In your case, if you want to use dry yeast, it's up to you. But for me, I'm using the wet yeast. Next, I add my water. The water should be lukewarm, ideally between 40 and 45 degrees. It is crucial for activating the yeast. The temperature range ensures that yeast thrives without being killed by excessively hot water. Too cold water can slow down yeast activity, while too hot water can kill it. Next, I start mixing my dough. I like using my hands. You can also use a stand mixer for this purpose, or you can use a spatula if you don't want the dough to stick to your hands. If you prefer to knead within the bowl, stretch the far side of the dough upwards, fold it over, and push it down into the bowl. Rotate the bowl and repeat this process along with some occasional squeezing and pinching for 10 to 15 minutes or until the dough is cohesive. Use a light dusting of flour on the work surface and your hands to prevent the dough from sticking. Don't be afraid to add a little bit more flour if the dough feels too sticky, but avoid adding too much as it can lead to a drier final product. Kneading by hand takes practice, so don't be discouraged if you find it challenging at first. To mix dough in a stand mixer, begin with the pedal attachment to combine ingredients until a shaggy mixture forms. Then switch to the dough hook for kneading, setting the mixer to medium speed. Monitor the dough's progress and it's ready when smooth, elastic and pulls away from the bowl side. Regularly check the dough's consistency. It should pull away from the sides of the bowl and form a ball. Be mindful not to over-knead, as this can result in tough dough. Over-kneading dough will feel tight and difficult to work with. The dough is ready when it is smooth, elastic and pulls away from the sides of the bowl, forming a ball. Allow the dough to rest for a few minutes after mixing. This helps relax the gluten and can improve the dough's handling. On a practical level, it takes up to 25 minutes, and some well-developed forearms muscles to knead dough by hand, and just about 8 minutes to knead in the stand mixer with a dough. However, if you do not own a stand mixer, you can still mix dough by hand and make a good load of bread for most doughs. A well-kneaded dough should be able to stretch thinly enough so that you can see light through it without breaking, a test known as the window pane test. Once kneaded, let the dough rest in a lightly oiled bowl covered with a clean cloth or plastic wrap for a specified time, usually around 60 to 90 minutes or until it is double in size. After 60 minutes rest period, typically the next step is to either punch down the dough, shape it, or proceed with the final rise before baking. If the dough has been allowed to rise for the first time, punching it down releases air and helps develop gluten strength. This step is practically important for bread recipes that involve a second rise. Once the dough has been punched down or has completed its first rise, it's time to shape it into the desired form of loaves. This step involves gently forming the dough into a final shape, ensuring it is not overworked. After shaping, the dough will need to rise for a second time, allowing it to develop the structure needed for baking. This final rise can be done on a baking sheet or in a proving basket or in baking tins, depending on the recipe. Once the dough has risen sufficiently, it's ready to be baked in a preheated oven. Baking times and temperatures vary depending on the type of bread and recipe. I will now proceed in shaping my dough into the desired shapes for my baking tins. As this recipe calls for 2 loaves of bread, so I'm now dividing my dough into 2 equal pieces, weighing approximately 950 grams each, and then I'm going to place them into my baking tins. Next, get your pans ready. The pans that I'm using is the normal standard loaf bread pans that you see in the shops. They are 354 by 284 by 115 millimeters. Make sure your pans are cleaned and carefully use either butter or margarine. Smear the butter or margarine inside and along the sides of the pan so that when you bake the bread it doesn't stick when it comes out. You can either use cooking spray for this purpose, but I'm just using normal margarine or butter. After preparing my pans, I'm going to go ahead and roll the dough. Start by flattening the dough and then press the dough with the bottom of your palm. And then roll from the one side into the middle and then from the other side into the middle and then pinch. You want to make sure that you roll the dough tightly and it forms a nice oval shape. Repeat this process with the remaining dough. Transfer your dough into the pans. Use a clean cloth to place over your dough so it doesn't dry out, and let it rise for a second time. When the dough is about 90% to the top of your pan, start preheating your oven and get ready for baking. Make sure your oven is at 250 degrees and place your bread in the oven. Bake for 30 minutes. Your bread should be ready after 30 minutes. This is how my bread looks after 30 minutes. If you like your bread a little bit crusty, you can leave it for another 3 to 5 minutes in the oven to get it a little bit darker. Carefully remove your bread from the pans. Allow the bread just to rest for a few minutes open and then transfer to a bread rack. It is crucial to let freshly baked bread cool completely before wrapping it. This prevents moisture buildup that can cause the bread to become soggy and stale faster. Wrapping the bread while it's still warm traps moisture, which then condenses on the bread, soften the crust and making the inside gummy. If you find this video insightful, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating world of baking and confectionery. There is much more to explore, and we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.